Hello and welcome back to Bostonian Rap. Sadly, we're moving into the last bit of our show. If you're just tuning in, thank you. You'll still get some great information on a great candidate, Bryan Fuller. He's running for the Boston City Council, an at-large seat. If you've been watching all along, thank you so much. So before we went to break, I did say that we are going to spend the last bit of the show talking about affordable housing, what exactly that is, as well as businesses, small business growth. So let's get right into it. Affordable housing. I just have to say that we have sky-high rents. To buy a home, it's
a lot.
It's a scary prospect. Even if you've worked really hard, have saved, you go through the listings and you say, my goodness, I can't even afford to buy a shack. It's wonderful. On the one hand, it's wonderful to see that Boston is such a desirable place to live. But on the other hand, you say, well, it can't just be a city for the wealthy. There has to be a plurality, to kind of reuse a phrase from earlier, there has to be a plurality, not only in other areas, but certainly, I think, in economic bands. And currently, because we do have such high rents and because to buy a home is actually so expensive, I think that, and I've had this discussion with other political figures, I think that we have to maybe, at the very least, tweak the term affordable housing, because affordable housing,
what does that even mean anymore?
Exactly. So why don't we do this? You tell me what you think it means, and what would you like to do as a city councilor at large to help make rents maybe
more palatable.
More palatable, and making the idea of actually owning your home. I appreciate that not everyone can own a home at any point in time. But if someone has worked really hard and has saved money,
a responsible
right
person, they should be able to buy a home. Absolutely.
Right. So what would you do in the capacity of a city councilor at large?
I think it's a great question.
To help enable people to be able to live.
So let me talk, I'm going to get to that in 1 second, but let me talk just briefly about why we're in the situation we're in right now. So you are 100% correct. Boston is an extremely desirable city, and we're going through a substantial period of growth right now. And that growth has been largely driven by developers who are great. But developers react to the current market conditions. So developers will say, wealthy people want to live here. Let's put up sky rises that go for $1,300 a square foot, or rents that start for $4,000 for 1,000 square feet. It's an enormous number.
Yeah, sure is.
So developers respond to that because ultimately they're not going to own this property. They're just going to build it and turn it over. And the only reason I say this, and like I said, it's not. I don't fault the developers. The developers are reacting to the market conditions. And there's only so much government can do to alter market conditions. However, this is where I think government is very important in managing some of this development, is that government takes a long view. So if a developer comes in my neighborhood where I own a little condo in South Boston, and if a developer comes in... Great neighborhood. If a developer comes in and purchases a bunch of, we'll call it affordable housing, for basically the middle class. Your Boston public school teachers, your firefighters, your plumbers, they go in, they buy these homes and they convert them into very, very expensive properties. It's happening all over the city, but mostly Seaport, Financial District, Back Bay, but you can see it. But what's happening is they're eliminating affordable housing, and they're making that return on high-income housing. And so they're creating a market now where, at one point you had like a sliver of high-income housing, and then you had all this affordable housing, and they've expanded this thing now. And what's happened is you've squeezed out this other part. So even though they may be building properties. They're building properties essentially for people to come into Boston who weren't here before. And that's a positive thing, but as a city councilor, I need to take a long view at that and say, in order for a city to function, we need affordable housing. And I think it's important to understand why we need affordable housing. There's many, many reasons. When you talk about business development, when you talk about economics in general, the number one thing that businesses will say is, that's a driver for them, is a competent and capable workforce. Now, this means to me people that are educated, that understand the industry, are trained, okay? And Boston has tons of them.
Sure, absolutely.
Very, very well trained and educated workforce here. But in order to be competitive for these businesses, they need to access this competitive workforce. And what happens is by creating an overstock of these high-income houses and eliminating that stock of medium to low-income housing, the people that do the jobs in Boston that the businesses want so desperately are moving elsewhere. So they move to another area. So what happens is Boston's actually making itself less attractive to business because there is no affordable housing for the people that are actually doing these jobs.
So as city council, you would take, you're saying what you call a long view.
A long view. So city council has a large responsibility in the development of Boston. And they have a responsibility for Boston in general, not to just have a giant tower put up, with giant penthouses for people, which are great. Boston also needs to say, what are we going to look like in 5 years? What are we going to look like in 10 years? We have as we mentioned before, we have the greatest college network of any city, maybe on the planet. And these college people represent an enormous opportunity for Boston to not only have this amazing pool of talent it has now, but to grow that pool of young talent. To keep them here in Boston and keep attracting those businesses. Because those businesses are going to mean more jobs to the people living in Boston and more jobs to the people that are here already. Because we have, generally 4 years to attract these people to this amazing city. And we want them to stay here because those people are going to attract.
As well as keep the natives here too.
That is critically important. That is critically important because those are the people that are really running everything. So Boston has an obligation to really take a long view and say, okay, that's great, you're going to put up this big tower. What percentage of that is going to be affordable? And if we're going to knock down this neighborhood to build luxury condominiums, what are we going to replace them with? We need to not only replace those existing ones, we need to grow the infrastructure for affordable housing across the city of Boston.
Okay. Well, that's great because you touched upon, I guess, my last question of the evening.
Okay.
And because I said that this segment I wanted to discuss affordable housing, but I also wanted to talk about business economic growth. And so, you certainly got into
I didn't mean to jump ahead.
No, you're quite all right. So you certainly got into that with your response to my last question. And I just want to share some news, and perhaps you already know. So I guess in West Roxbury, there was a grand opening of a business, Delectable Desires Pastries. And so there was the bakery owner. She received a microloan from Samuel Adams Brewing the American Dream program.
Love it.
Exactly. I saw that and I said, wow, okay, this weekend I have to go there. Now, in the capacity of a city councilor, would you try to increase the number of programs such as these? Would you try to, because what it essentially is you have a business encouraging
other businesses,
which I think is brilliant.
It is absolutely brilliant. I had not heard that story, and I love it, and I will swing by there tonight.
It's great.
But I think businesses are wise to look at their customers not necessarily as competition, but as ways to increase their own business
Absolutely.
by increasing their capacity. And I think you touched on a very important point, and we didn't really bring it up, but when the lowest income people can afford to live in a city, they increase the city's capacity tremendously. And I think a lot of people now are taking a hard look at what our minimum wage should be.
Certainly.
You know,
Some, I think occasionally heated but necessary debates because
I think it's necessary.
because I can certainly, from my political position, I can certainly understand where you can't just raise it without any regard for small businesses and the burdens that they would acquire. But having said that, you know, we have to look at making the cost of living more affordable. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. You've been such a wonderful guest. How can people get in touch with you?
So you can find me at www.bryandfuller.com. That's Bryan, D as in David, FULLER.com. There's sign up if you want to get involved in my campaign. There's an email address that goes right to me if you want to email me and say, hey, Bryan, these are my concerns. You know, I'm a small business owner. You know, I'm a student. Whatever your concerns are, just give me a call and I'll be glad to talk to you.
Bryan, thank you so much for appearing on tonight's show. And thank you so much, viewers, for watching. I will be back on February 13th, but until then, take care of yourselves.